Hello humans, hello humans. It's August 24th, it's 6:45 a.m. out here on the coast. With the tide in, we're actually the coast of the continent here. There's no additional beach with these early tides. These are early winter tides, and that's sort of what I wanted to talk about was the next, let's say, 6 weeks. The most recent data set that I had, I've been gradually getting into. My life circumstances are greatly changed, and it's affected the routine, the rhythm of my life, and I have not been able to get at or had the inclination to get at the data. I'm now in a position where I have to collapse the office out of the outbuilding and get it into the house here. And my wife's not here, so any activity I have won't be affecting her. I've cleaned up an area in which to put the office, and I just have to move that today. I'm going to leave the servers out there because I don't really have to interact with them much, and they can be stored in a safe spot. But basically what's happening is that I had an outbuilding. It's was built around an old RV, so it's a funky little building. I had it rehabbed. It's got a very tall ceiling. It was very good for all kinds of purposes, but it had a cement floor, which I couldn't deal with for like practicing rolling or, working out on even, right? The cement floor is just too hard on my ankles. So I had the contractor build in a floor, and the idiot didn't build in any vents or some other problem. Well, there are other problems, but anyway, the contractor put in a floor, which is now rotting. And so it's only 3 years and the whole floor is rotting out. So I have to get all this stuff out of there anyway, in order that we might repair the floor, which will be real straightforward except for all the crap in there. It's my warehouse for all my supplements and all my research materials and my tools and a lot of my weapons and, car parts and stuff, right? Because we're out a long way. It's not necessarily totally off grid, but I have to be prepared to, especially on key items, have to be prepared to be reasonably self-sufficient with my supplies. Anyway, long story. Anyway, I'm getting the office moved over, but I wanted to do this ahead of that, and then I'll set the office up over in the house here if I can, and see if I can do a couple of videos. I've got some subject matter I need to cover, but it needs a whiteboard, which is one of the reasons to go out and use the office, only I can't. So anyway, though, I was doing the out there starting the process of boxing stuff up in order to bring it in here, and had initiated a bunch of the processing, had a little bit of a look at it, and got intrigued about 3 hours ago when I got up, and because I'd started this last night, went to bed, and it was still percolating in my head when I got up, so we all did our doggy stuff here. It's raining, so we didn't get to go to the beach, and we had our breakfast, and then I went on out and did some work on the data, and while it was going, did a little bit of work in the boxing up and so forth, right? So I end up with some data that shows from our perspective now, because it's only a few days away, we would be looking at it in an immediacy data sense. But at the time of the processing, of course, because the data was collected so 8 weeks ago, 2 months, almost, it was like 7 weeks, was the last of the data sets. And in that sense, it's intermediate data, right? And it has a lot of values to it and so on. So a lot of heavily numerically weighted attributes with heavily numeric weighted aspects. And I got into that and thought, oh, okay, I probably should do at least a quick audio on it. So I'm going to try and keep this as quick as possible because I'm going to go to do out the lifting and heaving and haul all that stuff in here. In any event, though, so if we wanted to look at this in terms of its linear temporal relationship to our current now, we're looking at something that's going to be popping off in a reasonably big way in terms of a change of momentum in just a few days, maybe around the 27th or 28th, but ahead of September. However, all of September and into early October is showing a very definite uptick in emotional values, both building tension and release tension. Now, this actually is sort of a description of humanity as going through like a mental process over the course of these next, let's just say, 6 weeks, over these next 6 weeks and a few days, right? Because starts a few days earlier. But it's primarily really takes off in September, almost on the first or second. And then it just goes roaring all the way through in terms of the levels of building and then subsequent release language. And the release language appears to be eroding some of the built-up tension in the general discourse language. That is to say that we appear to be into a release period in which we're going to be releasing more built-up tension. So we're going to have release values that will take away from the building tension values that are already inherent in the social order. Now, this can be good and it can be bad. You can have a release period where you release a lot, and at the end of it, you just go, oh, whew, I'm glad that's out, right? I'm glad we're done with that. This is going to go on for a long time, though. So to a certain extent, I expect that this aspect of the release will be stressful for a lot of people. So just because there's a lot of release language out there does not mean that you're necessarily going to have an emotional release as a reaction to it. You may have a building tension to the reaction to it, just because of who is releasing language about what. All right. So it's going to be a difficult period for all of us. It'll be very intense emotionally. It's going to start off on, like I say, the 27th or the 28th of August. It'll run all the way through September, and then the data sets that I've processed so far go out to about October 14, 15, and continue with the trend, albeit in a somewhat reduced level of release relative to the amount of building tension coming in. So basically, I'm always trying to report the changes in the balance of release and building tension values. I apologize for the dog noises in the background. We've got a major war going on here, so between the dogs. Anyway, so it's like this in the winter. Everybody gets bottled up because of the storms. And this is an early storm for the time of the year. We don't usually get these kind in August. Anyway, so we're going to go into a period here in September, as I say, starting on almost on the 1st, but likely we'll see it on the 2nd or the 3rd, of release language that's going to pick up relative to a number of subjects here. And we can think of September as being some kind of a transition month, right? September and early October. Maybe it continues all the way through October. I haven't got the processing done. I will kick it off and start that processing while I'm out there moving the machinery and the furniture from the office out there into here. But I'm not even going to look at that data for a couple of days. It's just going to sit there and percolate as I do the rest of this work. Because, as I said, I have some video subjects I need to get done as well. Anyways, the transition aspect of September should become apparent to us by about mid-September or so. We should be able to really understand that the level of the release language is actually showing us a major shift, a major transition, exposing it. It's already really occurred, but it's going to be exposed to the extent that it will be discussed. So it would be, it wouldn't be out of line to imagine that sometime in mid-September or so, even the mainstream media would start realizing or talking about and recognizing the major shifts that have happened, not just that, so many voters are going over to Trump, but rather they might even start talking about the Great Awakening and the details of it, right? All the evils of the Elohim worship cult and all of this kind of thing, right? Much more so than simply alluding to it. And they may even at that point discuss it in relation to the darlings of the mainstream media, the whole celebrity class, and so on, and all the symbolism and this kind of thing, right? At some point, we're going to get to that level of discussion, where it will be an open discussion even on mainstream, and we'll get to the point where it's so much of that kind of discussion that it actually bores everybody and bores the normies even, right? Although they'll be fascinated in the early days of it. And the data sets would suggest that maybe this September is going to be the very early days of the cracking of the egg, of the release of the psoas, right? So most people don't understand. As you age, you really get a new relationship with your psoa muscles. This is PSOA. These are some of the most key muscles in your body. They connect your torso, your upper body from the hips up, down into the lower body, the legs. And these muscles are responsible for the how you carry your spine, okay? And if you have too much tension in these, you get the hunchback approach of old age, right? If you have too little tension in the muscles in the appropriate ways, insofar as it is for males, you get a sort of a sway back and a bulging abdomen kind of an effect. And you can correct these things. It's relatively easily done. I'll take a moment to get into it when I get done with the data discussion here. But in any event, so this is going to be like the psoa muscles of humanity are going to get released. And when that happens, when you've got too much tension in the wrong psoa muscles and you held it for a long time and someone comes along and shows you how to release, it is a marvelous thing indeed, right? And even in young people, they get their too much tension. The cortisol affects the psoa muscles because of the proximate location. They're going to get more of the cortisol influence than muscles in the extremities. So they'll hold and maintain strain longer and will drain you longer. And that's really what's been going on, is this strain of holding this illusion that was put on us by all this extra energy being pumped into our humanity psoa muscles by the mainstream media, by the Elohim worship cult. We've had to maintain this illusion, this non-fact-based paradigm, to the detriment of the social order, because we have to put all this energy into the delusion of it all, right? Now we're going to get some of that energy back, because we're going to go through a month, at least a month, maybe 2 or 3. And it's a long-term process. I mean, we're going to start this initial release. The psoas will sag from the lumbar 1 through 5. The side attachments of the lumbars to the vertebrae and the discs between them will start to readjust, and we'll be able to hold our spines in an appropriate manner as we are able to redistribute energy around these areas or through these areas that used to be obscured by, where the energy flow was obscured by all these knots and tension and cortisol damage, right? Stress damage. And so we'll have we'll be able to stand upright without pain, that kind of a deal. But it's going to take us a while, because we've held this tension for a long time. I know for a fact that my life has been lived within this illusion, that the delusion was put on us before I was born. So like in the late 40s, they really moved this in. And of course, it all has to do with obscuring the UFOs. And the extraterrestrials, right? Not demons, not angels, they're extraterrestrials. And they don't live in other dimensions. They simply use other methods of communicating that have tricked some humans into understanding that form of communication as being extra-dimensional when it's not really. Anyway, in September, we're going to get this multifaceted and very diverse level of focus for our release. So we'll get a lot of language about politics, tons of language about that, but we'll also get all kinds of release language here about academia, about colleges, and it may participate in a lot of colleges not being able to survive, right? There's stuff coming up relative to colleges and universities that is going to be existential in terms of will they be able to make it, and that stuff coming up begins this year, and it may indeed even begin on the 27th or 28th. Maybe that's a day where they report, oh geez, our enrollment's down 45%, or, our funding is now at risk because of the lack of students, because we get, not only do they get money from the student, which they take out debt in order to pay these colleges, but the colleges also get a stipend per student for brainwashing them for the Department of Education and the federal government. So they get all these kind of grants and shit that are basically, or that are based on the number of mines they're going to be able to pollute. And that's breaking down now, especially as the bank's going to come into some real problems here, and we'll see all sorts of funding issues. So what happens to a student if they take out a loan to go to some college, and the bank and bear in mind, the federal government doesn't give out these loans. They're bank loans that are then backed by the government, right? And they've just had the forgiveness of student loans, so those people have to start paying again and all of this. But what happens if the banks start collapsing around or ahead of the ability to shift money over to the college in some student's name? In other words, you take out a bank loan, but before you can actually get into college, the bank goes bust. And we're going to see a flurry of that. I think we're now up to like 140 banks in China that have collapsed, and the last 20 or 30 went very, very rapidly. It was unseen that it wasn't forecast that these particular banks were going to go down. Anyway, we're at that stage now here in the U.S. And so that will impact things. Colleges and universities are going to be struggling as a result of this. And that's going to impact a lot of other stuff as well, because of the flow through from the colleges into things like hospitals, big pharma research, government research even. So the data sets right now are suggesting that September marks a very good series of temporal markers that will be indicative of sliding into this new period, into this transition period. It's going to be part of the transition into sci-fi world, but in order to get in there, we've got to expose and shed all of this baggage. We've got to release the tension in the psoas such that we can align our spine in a correct way in order to be able to climb our way into sci-fi world. Bear in mind, if you're a swayback or a hunchback, you're not going to be able to do well walking uphill, right? So you're going to struggle. So the thing you need to do is to get your psoas at a personal level, but we're also doing it at a humanity level, and are going to get all this stuff sorted out. Now, this is going to be somewhat painful because it is a mental, physical process of rebuilding. We're going to have to rebuild specific tension and specific muscles in the appropriate way in order that we can keep our civilization upright and moving forward. So not going to be easy. Lots and lots of angry discourse and actions around that. It will take us some time to sort through a lot of this. The best advice I've got for September is to observe, but don't involve. So in other words, observe what's going on, but don't get your emotions all twisted up into it, because we've got so long to go. We've got so much else to do. And so if you need to have that level of detachment in order to get through it without being sucked in and flushed down the drain with a lot of the changes that we're going to encounter. The changes are showing up in finance. They're showing up in even on the internet stuff, right? So it wouldn't surprise me that we have internet outages and cyber attacks in a big way. All kinds of data sets for disruption causing release language in wide areas of humanity. So we'll see this in Northern Europe, we'll see this in the UK, we'll see it in Canada, We'll see it to a lesser extent in Asia, but certainly in North America and Central America and South America and Africa. There's going to be all kinds of release relative to the delusion that has been put on us. So now this is also going to be a lot of come to reality meetings between various groups that will then be openly discussing their common areas of interest and their common enemies. And so this is going to be just ever so exciting a time for all parties involved as this stuff comes out. I'm expecting that in this month we will see a greater level of release of language, of, secrets revealed kind of thing relative to UFOs and UAPs. I've got a number of sets that are going to this 0-point energy thing, right? And new language about that, like from new sources. And also the language set about, in United States, about what's described as like, it's described as major and also fundamental. So I'm presuming way down at a deep level. Whistleblower guy comes and gets a lot of press, gets a lot of visibility, and is part of this transition of this month of September. This is the data sets appear to say that this guy is a new personality, reluctant to come out, has credentials up the yin-yang, and that means everybody should pay attention to him. It's not like, Captain Mark Richards, a guy who's lifer in jail pretending to be a spaceonaut, right? It's not like that. It's going to be somebody with real credentials. I don't know that they're military, but there's a lot of language about the military around them. Anyway, so they're going to boost us off on UFO, UAP talk, and then there's also a lot of data sets showing that UFOs and UAPs are going to continue their shows for us. We're going to see a lot more of these multi-object interactions that don't make any sense to us, but that will be observed by lots of people. And we'll also have more of the claims by individuals that there were landings that occurred in their local area. Some will claim to have had interactions. None of the data sets really show that this is, so the data sets would show that that particular subset relative to the claimed interactions, and it does have the word claimed, so it's not just saying interactions, but the claimed interactions does show some level of fact, possibility that it's factual, but in the main, it's a lot of posers, right? And so that's going to be part of our problem, is the obscuring and all of this sort of thing. I think that's really about it. I didn't want to go much longer, and I'm going to start hauling stuff, but I wanted you to understand that this transition period is getting close to us, 3 or 4 days away. I don't know what we're going to see on the 27th or whatever, but it starts off at a fairly exciting level. The building tension has ramped up through the latter half of August, and then we start these release spikes where it'll jump up and then drop down, and it drops down a little bit more than the total amount of the rise, such that it starts slowly whittling away some of the built-up tension language. We're going to see a lot about history, by the way. We're going to really get into it this month. Even in MSN, they're going to have some kind of a speed bump, a road bump in their narrative, in their propaganda that runs smack into history, and they're going to have a real problem. So I don't know what that's going to be. I haven't gotten into the data sets to get too much more detail, and it's unlikely it'll occur until maybe sometime next week or something like that. Anyway, talk to you guys later. Take care. Release your psoas. Oh, I'll tell you about that. Okay, real quick. The psoas muscles connect the inner upper thighs up through the groin area into the lumbar and higher areas of your spine. They do it as these little individual muscles that act as a unit, as though that was a single muscle. It's a very complex structure. Unique among mammals in many regards. That's why you don't see a lot of mammals walking upright. A lot of that has to do with the way their bodies are put together. Okay, so the psoas muscles can take an incredible amount of tension. So much tension in them that they will, over the course of time, distort your back until you are a hunchback or a swayback, and no amount of chiropractic or any of that kind of stuff is ever going to affect it, because the problem is not within the spine, it's within the soft tissue of the psoas muscles. And we do not, as a rule, in our social order, train anybody about these internal muscles in, like, phys ed and stuff, right, as you're growing up. But it's relatively easy to do, although it could be painful in the initial stage of it, which is to release the psoas and release all the tension in them, and then put in the appropriate amount of tension, okay? But it's conceptually very simple to do. You come across this in the martial arts without even knowing it. Okay, so to release your psoas, all that is required is diaphragmic breathing, okay? So it's a through breath all the way down to the deep abdomen, and in doing so, you cause your diaphragm to really rise up, expand, and then alter itself. And the psoas muscles rise up through from the lower legs, come on up and attach to the sides of the spine, to the vertebrae, the sides of the disc in the spine, and then they have a component that continues on up to rise almost to the bottom of where your diaphragm is. And so if you push your diaphragm down, you push it down on top of the psoas muscles, and it acts like a lever and causes the tension to be released. Now, bear in mind, it can be painful if you've got a lot of tension in those psoas muscles. So you need to sit down and, get yourself the time to deal with it if you get a major release, because you won't be able to walk or anything afterwards for a few minutes, because of the release of that tension. You'll be very much, jello-like internally. And it'll take you a while to get those muscles re-coordinated, like, 2 or 3 minutes sometimes. Okay, so that's, then the body will naturally try and put tension back into these muscles after the release. You can release as many times in a day as you want. Pretty soon there won't be any more tension in them to release, and the effect won't be there. And so you'll stop doing it. So you can't really over-release these muscles. You get there by altering the height, so to speak, within your body of the range of the diaphragm, such that it pushes down further into the abdomen. You do that by taking in these deep breaths that go all the way down and attempt to fill your lungs all the way to the bottom. And then you breathe in a natural fashion. You just do it extra deep. And then you breathe out in a natural fashion in a slow release. And you'll feel the tension coming out of the psoas. Now, at some point, you need to strengthen and put tension into the psoas in a coordinated fashion, right? So rather than just have the cortisol and the stress hormones pumping out too much electricity that gets all jammed up into the psoas muscles and twists them up, causing this hunchback or gets to a blockage, which causes the sway back. That's what happens. There isn't enough tension in the psoas muscles at the very upper reach, and you get that extra curve in your spine that has a tendency to bulge out your abdomen. This is also corrected by this abdominal diaphragmic breathing, because it forces your body to re-coordinate all that stuff and make room for stuff, right? But you probably, if you're old, you indeed may find that you have some level of pain in doing this, and you're going to have to approach it in a slow fashion and do it gently. Anyway, though, to rebuild, you want to do the Warrior 2 pose from BKS Iyengar Yoga. It's probably the same Warrior 2 in everybody's yoga system, but I do Iyengar Yoga, so I'm familiar with that one. So you do Warrior 2 transitioning into the single leg stance. You don't have to do the single leg part. If you're old and, you got a shaky back or whatever, you don't have to stand on one leg with the other leg extended out behind you and lean forward. What you do need to do, though, is to stand well and comfortable and then do the breathing of Warrior Two as you do bend over at the hips. Don't bend over in the abdomen. So it's like a ballerina kind of a bend. In order to put the tension back into the psoas, you want to bend at the hips. You can put your hands down there and put fingers on your hips to make sure you're bending at that point and not really collapsing your spine. So you want to bend with your spine straight at the hips in order to then, when you stand back up, the body will reallocate the electrical energy in each of the psoas. They're sort of like harp strings, and so you'll see a lot of symbolism around harps and harp strings. And they need tension in each individual one appropriate to its length and to its position relative to the thigh and to which part of the lumbar section of the spine or higher it bonds to, right? Anyway, the psoas are neglected frequently. They're just not talked about in Western medicines at all, but they're very key muscles. And then there's one last... I'll save that. I'm going to do that other stuff on a video. But anyway, so take care for September. Do your breathing in your Warrior Two. Get yourself all fit for this because it's coming real quick.
There you go right there. That is worship music. That is what we're all going to be doing together. You will be praised. Worthy is your name, not ours. Your name. How do you not get goosebumps? How do you not get those gospel goosebumps when you are engaged in fellowship this way? When you know that what you are gathering for and what you're singing for is for Him, not for you, not for us. I want to say congratulations to T. Mitchell. Just posted on the LFA Family Facebook page some new images of their grandbaby. What a blessing. What a blessing. What a blessing. So happy for you. Godchick said, you said the same thing as I typed it. Wow, wow, wow. Folks, I'm telling you, you know when you get ready to cry and those tears start welling up and your throat starts tightening a little bit and like I got those right now and the goosebumps I got. That usually happens every morning, but it allows me the moment to realize that the Heavenly Spirit is with us during the show. The Heavenly Spirit is present. God is present. That's why we feel this way. Annette says you cannot have anxiety while you praise and worship and give thanks. Part of the brain does both and can't respond to both at the same time. What a blessing from God. I mean,